Hello, welcome to another Black History Moment. Reading from Black Saga. Conditions aboard slave ships. A typical slave ship traveling from Gambia, the Gold Coast, Guinea, or Senegal would take 4 to 8 weeks to reach New England, Chesapeake Bay, the Gulf of Mexico, or the West Indies. Africans from Senegal were the most prized because many were skilled artisans. Igbos from Calabar were considered the most undesirable because of their high suicide rate. Women, men, and children were crammed so tightly in the ships that out of a load of 700 slaves, 3 or 4 would be found dead each morning. Most ships had 3 decks. The lower 2 used for transporting slaves. The lowest deck extended the full length of the ship and was no more than 5 feet high. Slaves were packed into it side by side to utilize all available space. In the next deck, wooden planks, like shelves, extended from the sides of the ship, where slaves chained in pairs at the wrists and ankles were crammed side by side. Men occupied middle shelves and were most often chained in pairs and bound to the ship's gunwales or to ringbolts set into the deck. Women and children were sometimes allowed to move about certain areas of the ship, although buckets were provided for use as toilets. They were not emptied regularly. The ships smelled of excrement, disease, and death. It is estimated that between 15 and 20% of the slaves died en route to the colonies, mostly from diseases associated with overcrowding, spoiled and poisoned food, contaminated water, starvation, and thirst, and suicide. Others were thrown overboard, shot, or beaten to death for various reasons. Slave trading became big business during the 17th century. Slaves were acquired in Africa for an average price of about $25 each, paid primarily in merchandise. They were sold in the Americas for about $150 each. As the price of slaves increased, so did the inhumane overcrowding of the ships. During the later 1600s and throughout the 1700s, most English ships coming directly to the American mainland from Africa carried about 200 slaves and weighed about 100 to 200 tons. Although some were slightly larger, slave ships were eventually built especially for human cargo. They were long, narrow, and fast, and were designed to direct air below decks. Shackling, irons, nets, and ropes were standard equipment. These slave ships could carry as many as 400 slaves and a crew of 47, as well as 13,000 pounds of food. After 1750, the competition at slaving markets on the African coast grew exceptionally keen, and European vessels either left without full loads of slaves or waited several months to purchase a full cargo. Thank you for listening to this Black History Moment.